not lose heart. Even though this present age will waste away, we will surely suffer, but it's a slight momentary trouble. The deconstruction is painful, but the transformation is beautiful. When we, the children of God, are crushed under the heavy affliction of this world, be reminded that it's weightless in comparison to the eternal measure of God's glory. We have lost our eyes for the unseen and have swallowed the false hope of the visible. We must realize the empty grave and revel in the certainty of his resurrection with assurance of renewal, considering it worthy to suffer for the faith. So we will worship while we wait. One unfortunate moment, you took everything that I own, everything you've given from heaven above and everything that I've ever known. If you stripped away my ministry, my influence, my reputation, my health, my happiness, my friends, my pride, and my expectation, if you caused for me to suffer, or to suffer for the cause of the cross, if the cost of my allegiance is prison and all my freedoms are lost, if you take the breath from my lungs and make an end of my life, if you take the most precious part of me and take my kids and my wife, it would crush me, it would break me, it would suffocate and cause heartache. I would taste the bitter dark providence, but you would still preserve my faith. What's concealed in the heart of having is revealed in the losing of things, and I can't even begin to imagine a sting that kind of pain brings. I would never blame you for evil, even if you caused me pain. I came into this world with nothing, and when I die it'll be the same. I will praise your name in the giving and taking away. If I have you, I could lose everything and still consider it gain.
It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word makes a difference. It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word changes everything. It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word makes a difference. It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word changes everything.
Everyone who trusts in you will not be put to shame. If that's not what I believe, then why is that what I proclaim? If it don't change how I live, should I still shout it just the same? If I shout it as loud as I can, will blessings shower down from the heavens and land on my crown? To rinse away all my doubt, and the grace of God is only sweet to the ears who hear the sound of it, but that sweetness won't be tasted by the mouth of a counterfeit faith. Only the thirsty will drink from the fountain of life and count everything is a loss for the sake of being found in Christ. Obedience to God's word is the safest foundation, a safe haven for saints waiting for the glorious great day when our Savior will return. That's the day of restoration. Those who sleep will be awakened, and we will never cease to thank Him, singing, worthy is the Lamb to receive glory and honor. Worthy is the Lamb who reconciled us to our Father. Worthy is the one who gives life without end. But if Christ is not raised, then we get still in our sin.
It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word makes a difference. It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word changes everything. It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word makes a difference. It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word changes everything. It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word makes a difference. It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word changes everything. It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word makes a difference. It can mean everything, it can mean nothing. One word changes everything.
Do we just leave it spinning in this?
Well,
I'll just hold it.
Yeah, just hold it.
I got it now. Sweet. So those are the first two songs on the record. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to moderate the conversation between us so we can talk a little bit about them. So on our first two albums, Satellite Kite and Instruments of Mercy, they both started with instrumentals. Hello from Portland and then Cello from Portland. And on this record,
semi-instrumental, but
and this record, well, I think we initially started, it was
Yeah.
going to be an instrumental, right? But we decided it was appropriate to add the poem from Thomas to put some words to accompany kind of just how to enter into the record. But Cortland, talk about musically what it was like to think about how to start this record, because it's instrumentally a lot different than how the other two records started.
Yeah, the other ones are super chill. And I think with the album called Worthy, you can't really start it with, rain and soft guitar playing. So I don't know, I think that immediately set the trajectory for what I was going to play. I think, just something majestic obviously comes into mind. And when I think of majesty or things that are majestic in our world, I think of like a big church. Pipe organ obviously was used in the opening song. So, I would say just in general, like I was super influenced by Interstellar, and I'm sure some people could probably catch that on how that sounded. But I think that was just the goal, was trying to have sounds that start with the bigness of God. So, yeah.
And there's this wordplay with the title, because it's called Wait, and you're thinking about this weightiness. You're also thinking about the fact that there was a long wait between the last record and this record, and then the way in which weight was used in the wordplay, even in the poem, just the weight of temporary afflictions in comparison to eternal glory. After that, we get into If. And if you look at the track list, you'll notice all the songs on the album are one-word titles. We knew this album was going to be called Worthy clear back while we were working on Instruments of Mercy. So one of the initial ideas was that Instruments of Mercy was going to be an EP, and that was going to lead into an album called Worthy. And so that
I thought about that.
Yeah.
Dude, we had Worthy before we finished Satellite Kite, I thought.
Yeah, as in terms of a concept.
In terms of a concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It had existed for a long time, and the idea, even with the one-word titles kind of coming into our third record, was to kind of take words and then infuse meaning and depth into them. So often words begin to lose their meaning when they become super familiar to us. But out of all these, titles like Doxology, Omnipotent, the first full-length song is just a song called If, the most simple, small, seemingly insignificant word, but then the chorus talks about how one word can change everything. You insert the word if in a sentence, and it can completely change the meaning of the sentence. Thomas, in your verse, you kind of talk about if this happened, if this happened, if this happened, all these different events, which basically are all tragic events, right? But then the kind of qualifying conclusion, though, is that if I have Christ, I can lose everything and still consider it gain. And so even if all these things happen, what was it like? What inspired some of your thought process in writing that verse?
Well, I think this was the first time I've written a record or been a part of a record as a father and as a pastor. And so I think all of these things are just natural for me to process. Like you obviously think about loss differently when you become a married man. And then when you become a father, you think about loss differently. So I just really thought about what might my life look like as a believer if God was to strip away everything from me. And the reality is, although it would crush me and I would feel this emotional wrecking, the reality of it all is that I still have everything because I am fixed in Jesus Christ. And so really I just try to juxtapose all of the losses to all that I have in Christ. And so that's if becomes really important at that point.
Yeah. In my verse, I do a lot of basically, if I shout what I believe, does that cause me to believe it more? What can I do to muster up faith, or to even put it to the test to see if my faith is authentic or not? And I kind of come to this part of singing praises, worthy is the Lamb, but then the closing statement, if Christ is not raised, we are still in our sin. That all I could muster up to believe something, and all I could muster up to say, I'm going to base my life on this, I'm going to shout about it, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, If it wasn't for the fact that Christ was truly raised from the grave, there would be no power in my believing. And so Jesus becomes the variable there. Is Christ raised from the grave? And if he is, then there is power to my faith, because he has accomplished what he set to accomplish through his life, death, and resurrection. And so the if doesn't lie on me in that, in terms of my power, but the if lies on the accomplishments of Christ. The next song in the record is Sovereign. Also, just a fun note, you'll notice when we did Instruments of Mercy, I started my first verse on the record using the last line from Satellite Kite, and there's a little bit of play where I do the same thing on this. So we kind of try and do little fun things like that we include in our records, just for people who can catch it. And now I let you catch it anyway, but that's only if you're on Facebook. So we're not going to play Sovereign because that's already come out. That was the second single. But Sovereign was one of the last songs that got created in terms of the music. Cortland was making beats for Jackie's album, and he made that beat. And Thomas and I were listening to it, and it's like, this is what the Beautiful Eulogy album needs. And so before Jackie told us whether or not she wanted it, which she probably wouldn't have wanted it anyway, but before she even had a chance to say that she wanted it or didn't, we were like, actually, Jackie, we're going to take that submission and we're going to use it. And I was just so happy with how the song turned out, because the combination of, when I first imagined what the song Sovereign was going to be like, I didn't imagine it over like this kind of chill, feel-good beat.
For sure.
But when we would listen to the song, I was like, this just works together in a way that I wouldn't expect. Talk just a little bit about the music on that.
I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about it. It was just a beat that I felt like was dope while I was making it.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know, it was something about like, I don't know, I think I have a tendency of doing like happy sounding, dark sounding stuff. You know what I mean? And I think that, to me, that's kind of just my style, and Sovereign kind of plays into that. Like, you start off with this just super low cello sound, and it sounds like, oh, this is gonna be like eerie, and you know, and then it's like you have these bright like piano or synth stabs on top of it, and it's just that like juxtaposition, I feel like, and I think it works for the concept with Sovereign. Yeah, just because I don't think we can like necessarily pinpoint God on all these things, right? He is like the ultimate authority over that, and I think just this kind of like somewhat mysterious sound, it just fit really well, you know? So, yeah.
And depending on your perspective, the idea of God being sovereign can either bring you great comfort and great joy and great peace, but at the same time, either if the idea that God is sovereign but you don't trust him, then that actually can be unnerving, because you have this idea of what you want for yourself, and the idea that your desires might not line up with his plan. It's like that can be unnerving, or it can be very comforting. And so there's a tension, I guess, in the production that ended up fitting really well. But the way I interpret it, it feels really good to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's get to, we're gonna skip ahead. Oh, turn on the record player.
There it is.
We're gonna skip ahead to
So this song is Doxology featuring Latifah from Page CXVI.
The shadow blocks my view of the groove here.
Do you need my flashlight?
Yeah, that would be great.
Hold up.
I feel like I'm working on a car. Okay. Yeah, these grooves are smaller, bro.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise
sacrifice of praise. I know it's gonna cost me. The cost is not greater than the cross where you bought me. I was lost and you sought me. I was ignorant, you taught me. I was impotent against my enemies, you fought for me. I exist for your glory, never for mine. I never would shine if it wasn't for your spirit inside. You made me alive when I was dead in trespasses. The passion of Christ left my sin in the past tense. Every good and perfect gift comes from your hand. You set me back on course when I run from your plan. No excuse to refuse to lift my voice, because the gospel is true, there's always reason to rejoice. And that don't mean that my sorrow is inconspicuous, but when I grieve I got a greater joy in the midst of it. The joy of knowing I will see you face to face, and it's all to the praise of your glorious grace.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above the heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Oh God, full of glory and grace, open in me a fountain of faithful praise. Let it flow from the depths of my heart like great lakes. Let my soul be the sweetness that spreads its fragrance. Save me from the love of the world that you created, more than the God whose beautiful hands made it. Break me from pride and consecrate me. Make me feel the weight of my sin, sorrow, and safety. Let me sing with the saints of your great salvation, and join in the songs of all creation. Let the winds obey, the oceans wave, the mountains cave. Let every star you place display grace. Let my speech do the same as the skies proclaim. Let everything that has life and breath bless your name. Let the earth be the stage where all creation aims to heaven in endless praises and adoration.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above the heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
So doxology, we always had an idea. I think even back, we always thought about it would be cool if we ended our set that way, or if we found a way to do a rendition of the doxology, which has just always been a big part, a meaningful song to us as a group, and then just meaningful in our church life. Thomas, you want to talk just a little bit about the doxology?
Yeah, well, in our church, we sing this almost every single time we gather together on Wednesdays, right? We close out our worship service singing the doxology. It's something that we're always singing in our homes. I sing it with my kids probably every night, unless my kids feel sick of it, but they almost already know all the words. So it's just a very, very special song for us, and it's this idea of worship. All creatures here below worship God, and so we were really excited about taking a different twist on this, and this is what we came up with. And Latifah hooked it up. She did a really, really good job with the vocals, and
Yeah. It was basically like, how can we make a hip-hop rendition of this?
but not like a cheesy hip hop
Yeah.
rendition.
Well, what's funny is, so Latifah actually came to Portland. We were working on this, and at the time, we had 2 studios here at our office, and so I was trying to mix Messiah because it was our first single, and you guys were working with Latifah, and the first version we came up with, Doxology, it was like this almost like dance version.
It was horrible.
It was like glow sticks, Doxology, and
But you have to get through that.
yeah, you have to
have
get
to-
through that. Sometimes you have to just explore an idea. So then we had her vocals, and then Cortland's like, I'm going to try something different musically. And he began composing this, and then Latifah eventually retracked her vocals, and I think it ended up fitting way better. But yeah, doxology, obviously, even with Humble Beast, creativity, humility, theology, doxology, so much of our music is often thought of as theological, or, oh, Brian and Thomas, they do a lot of theological rap. But really, in that, the goal is that it would lead to doxology, that it would lead to the praise of God. And so this song just kind of exemplifies that. The next two songs we're not going to play, but we'll talk about a little bit. And the reason is because there's Overture, which is an interlude, which leads into Messiah, which was the first single. Most of you have heard it. When you get the album, you can listen to everything in succession. But talk a little bit about Overture. We always have also included an instrumental track somewhere on the album.
Yeah.
And this played that role, but in a different way.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just as I started, like, just becoming a better producer, hopefully, just over the time of, like, creating music, I think the one thing I've always just realized recently is just, like, I gravitate towards the piano. And I think that, I mean, that's where I write most of the music, is at the piano. And then that'll sometimes get translated into, you know, synths or whatever. But it usually starts there, and I think it's just the most natural way for me to create melodies. And so, and yeah, that wasn't something I really thought about until, you know, maybe a year and a half ago. And so Overture is just kind of my ode to the piano in a lot of ways. It's just, yeah, I just wanted to do something that was instrumental. And I think it also, it's a good meditation song. So without it being like a busy or like, just like, you know, headbanger type joint, I wanted to do something that was just very contemplative. And I think that Overture definitely accomplished that. And so I started writing this piano melody, and then I transposed it into some sheet music, and then I sent it to actually a girl, Hannah Vandermeer, that goes to our church. And she plays the piano, and she's written a few pieces that she's played at church, which I thought that she was really talented at writing piano pieces. And so me and her collaborated on it. I kind of started the melody, sent it to her, and then she kind of developed the piece out. And then we went to the studio, me and Brian, and recorded it live with her playing on it. And yeah, I'm like really happy how it turned out. So
Yeah.
It's almost like every song on the record has piano, huh?
yeah, almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, not on.
Yeah, it
not
kind of became the
omnipotent.
center piece.
Yeah.
So
And then after that is the first single, Messiah. When we were making the album, we had some deadlines and we needed to turn in a single. And so we were like, okay, the album wasn't even done yet. And this was a year and a half ago. So a year and a half, or maybe even 2 years ago, but at least a year and a half ago, we finished Messiah, and we were like, okay, that could be the first single, but the whole rest of the album wasn't done. And so it was getting ready to release, and I was like, I don't think we're gonna have the album done in time, so let's not release the single. But by the time we were done with the album, it still felt like it should be the first single. And Messiah is a good example of the way that the titles panned out on a lot of these songs. I think when we initially picked the title Messiah, there's a lot of predictable ways we could have went, and the concept, I think, shaped into something that was much different than what we even initially imagined, where we talked about how we treat our desires and we treat the things that we want as if they're the preeminent, most important thing, as if they can do more for us than what Christ has already done for us. And so our well-being, our perception of how our life goes, it all becomes attached to these things that we want or who we want to be perceived as. And shifting that focus where Jesus actually has already done more for me than any of these other things that I want. And therefore, I can build my identity around him and his accomplishments rather than building them upon what I think I need to accomplish. And yeah, just the way that fleshed out was really interesting. Zach from Citizens and Saints, he was in town, and we worked on that song with him. We came up with like 3 or 4 different choruses. The first chorus we had was terrible. We were singing it. We were trying to sound like
I don't know.
It doesn't even matter.
it doesn't matter.
Beirut.
Yeah, we were sounding like Beirut. Anyway, and it just wasn't working. But what's so cool, what I like about that song, is that not only is the approach to the concept unpredictable, but even just how unique the song structure is. One thing we felt with our other albums, and we were always happy with the records as we made them in the various stages, but we felt like sometimes the songs didn't end up being as dynamic as we would like after listening to them later on. As to where on this song you have something that's completely unique for the intro. You have this verse section that's like raw and grimy, and yet you have this chorus that's really bright and catchy.
Bridge from Zach.
You have this bridge section that completely strips down and is just the piano. You have this outro part. And so this was like more dynamic than anything we had made. Probably one of the most dynamic songs on the record as well. But yeah, it held up kind of by the time the album was done. And we were able to release it as the first single. I'm going to flip the record though now.
Flip it.
Flip it and get to... But that was the first song we finished. Messiah was the first song that we have officially finished from the album. The next two songs we're going to get into are Mosaic and Omnipotent.
And I don't wanna go to your funeral, I'd rather die first. But I don't want you to see me die, so I don't know which one is worse. It's like the lesser of two evils, I know these days are evil. So I pray the Lord will guard me from the evil one. He's scheming, I seen friends turn their back on the Lord. It weighs heavy on my shoulders, yet I know the story isn't over. So I'm hoping for the best and keeping my mind sober. When my phone rings, I hear the voice of somebody that's broken, and I wanna say I told you, now it's too late to listen. Running in circles with friends who struggle with addiction. Caught in the spider's web, this life is but a vapor, and lust is like a viper waiting in the grass to strike you. I was called to give my life instead of keep it. Gotta leave behind my sin if I wanna follow Jesus. In our weakness is where the gospel meets us. The beauty of redemption revealed in our broken pieces.
Shadows cross right over me, right through me, and my thankfulness for this life is busted up suddenly. But you go to the bed, I go my inmost being. Sowing seeds of gratefulness, you see me.
God is my rest, but lately I'm losing sleep. The good shepherd never loses track of his sheep. That's a good thought to ponder when I see so many wander off-road. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under when I'm overwhelmed. I know I'm in over my head, fighting with myself, but my opponent is dead. How can we win the battle when we burn deeply within? Jesus laid down his rights, I can lay down my sin if he is Lord. All that competes with him loses, only he completes me. It cuts through the confusion of my wants and my needs, my desires and my dreams. His love inspires me to lift my thoughts to higher things. I was called to give my life instead to keep it. There's nothing worth keeping if it's keeping us from Jesus. In our weakness is where the gospel meets us. The beauty of redemption revealed in our broken pieces.
Shadows cross right over me, right through me, and my thankfulness for this life is busted up suddenly. But you go to the bed like oh my inmost being. Sowing seeds of gratefulness, you see me. Shadows cross right over me, right through me, and my thankfulness for this life is busted up suddenly. But you go to the bed like oh my inmost being. Sowing seeds of gratefulness despite my feelings. 'Cause 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 'c
weakest man I know is the man I see in the mirror. But it's okay to be inferior when you know Christ is superior. Much stronger than my fears and doubts. He's the overcomer. He holds me up when I'm overwhelmed by the weight my soul is under. From the highest throne is flashes of lightning and rolls of thunder. Yet he knows the number of hairs upon my head. I'm full of wonder that the one with universal power would be personal with his creation as he unfolds his gracious purposes so perfectly. I was purchased by the death of Jesus, crucified in weakness. I worship a God who weeps, who intercedes for me while I sleep. Yes, I know he hears my cries. He doesn't roll his eyes, but rather he sympathizes and reminds me that all my needs have been provided. I have no reason to trust that I could be strong enough on my own, so I gladly boast in my weakness that Christ's power might be shown, manifested through my life to prove my faith is genuine when tested. Cause in the depths of my weakness is where my strength gets perfected.
Almighty God, omnipotent, you're my confidence, you're my confidence. I am so convinced, you hold me in my helplessness, you're my confidence, you're my confidence. I am so convinced.
Yeah, I understand what it means to be branded as a biblical man, but I can't stand the fact that I still try to live up to man's standards. It's really hard for me to be perceived as needy when everyone around me seems to be succeeding while making life look so easy. I'm constantly fighting this feeling of failing as a father and this feeling of falling short as a husband, this sort of never measuring up. Of course it's all in my mind. It's just an expression of my pride. Yeah, I get it, but it's still hard for me to admit it sometimes. I get so tired of taking refuge in my own strength while standing with the weight of my insecurities on my back until my bones break. It won't make a difference to my situation as a whole, whether I tend to hold it together for the moment or pretend to be in control. God mold me into a man who holds fast to your everlasting hands. Give me the strength that I need to get past my circumstances. God rescue me. Make my desperate attempts cause me to confess my dependence, and may the depths of my weakness make strength perfected.
Almighty God, omnipotent, you're my confidence, you're my confidence. I am so convinced, you hold me in my helplessness, you're my confidence, you're my confidence. I am so convinced. Almighty God, Almighty, Almighty, Almighty God, Almighty, Almighty God.
You want to turn that off, homie?
Straight raining up in here.
It is raining. We didn't need to add it to the intro, you know? So Mosaic, that song has the most live instrumentation on the record, in the sense that not in this. I mean, everything has live instrumentation, but this, in terms of acoustic instrumentation and guest musicians, we actually have Daniel Seavey from Why Don't We playing the acoustic guitar on there. Ryan is playing the bass. Daniel Steele is playing the drums. And then you're playing the piano. So it's like a band track, which we've never really done something that has all live instruments like that. But I always liked the music from the first time you kind of wrote that piece on the piano.
Yeah, it was like, I mean, to me, I just imagined like a Wes Anderson film with just that beginning, that piano melody. So I think that again was just something I wrote on its own, and then we kind of, created the rest of the track after that, and kind of built out, okay, what are the verses going to be? And yeah, man, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was, it kind of went through different variations between drum selection and programmed drums, and I was like, man, it just needs something live. So yeah, going over to Daniel Steele's place and him laying down the drums just really brought some life to the track. And I think the live bass, I think that's the only track that we have live bass on. Everything else is, a synth bass or something programmed. So that definitely just gave it just some, movement that the rest of the tracks don't have too. So yeah, I love how it turned out.
you'll notice on that song that I'm the only one rapping. And what was supposed to happen, or at least the initial plan, not what was supposed to happen, but what the idea was that was going to be a song where Thomas and I were both going to have verses. And then later on in the record, there's a song called Emmanuel, which is just a poem. And I was going to do that poem because Thomas did the poem at the end of Messiah and in the beginning of the record. And on our previous records, we would always have each do a poem as well. So sometimes we kind of follow similar patterns that we had from the other records. But we decided as we were going, Thomas was like, I don't think I can really write anything for this that's not going to be something I've already written. And so it was kind of like, can you just do Mosaic? And I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to do Mosaic on my own, then I'll have you do Emmanuel. So we kind of swapped those things. And so Mosaic was one of the last songs.
It was the last.
It was the last song. Yeah, it was the last song that was recorded. And it was interesting because you had the music was done. We had the chorus from Aaron Strumpel. So I'm like, everything's done. I've got this title, the music, a chorus, and I've just got to fill it in with verses. And this is in the process of mixing the rest of the record. And so I came to the studio. Thomas stayed up with me. We went to the supermarket and got some snacks, salami and cheese and some veggies. And I was just like, man, what do I do on this? Part of the initial concept was to talk about gratitude and talk about gratefulness, but the between the chorus and the mood of the music, it just took another direction. And I was really reflecting on various friends that I have, and so often when my phone rings and I see different names pop up, I know they're calling me because something rough or something messed up is going on in our lives. That's why they're calling me. And just thinking about both the pain that comes with repeated sin issues in your life, but then also sometimes the pain that is associated that you feel in your flesh of walking away from something that you want but you know is not good for you and is interfering with your walk with Jesus. And so this getting to this kind of, it seems sad to leave this because I want it, but the reality is this is no good, and there's nothing worth keeping if it's keeping me from Jesus. This just process of discipleship, of saying, he is Lord, and so I'm going to submit to him regardless of how I feel about it in the moment. And so there's a sadness that kind of, I think, relates to experientially what that can be like for people, and yet there's this thankfulness and recognition that I want to hold on to these things that are destroying me, and yet Jesus releases me from these things, sets me free from them, and leads me to himself, where I will find greater satisfaction ultimately. And so, yeah, anyway, the way the record came together, I think, like, I got on even after writing it, when I got in the booth, I was like, man, it's late, I'm tired, my vocal feels really weathered, but it was just right for the song. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite songs. I love the way it came out. Tone, content, it's great.
Anyway, yeah, I'm hopeful that people who are in that tension and just dealing with their own brokenness just see that Jesus is worth it, to abandon anything that would impede you from following him. Thomas, when we get to the song Omnipotent, we did that song, Chad Gardner from King's Kaleidoscope sings the chorus, but you have a really personal verse on there. And again, this is one where the concept that you have this song Omnipotent, which is, you think about God being all-powerful, almighty, and then how do we go from that being the concept to the verse that you wrote?
Yeah, well, I think probably over the last maybe 2-3 years, I've spent a lot of time reading blogs and reading articles, and I think the aim was to take in content to help me navigate the Christian life. So I just was floating around a lot of different blogs and a lot of articles, as well as reading the scriptures. But I would just be flipping through my phone and I would come across these articles, 10 steps to help you become a more devoted Christian father, and or practical steps of being a healthy husband, all these blogs and all this content that I was taking in, and I think like what it was doing to me, it was actually having an adverse effect. It was making me feel like, man, I really don't think I'm strong enough. I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I'm faithful enough. And so all these things that I initially was appealing to help make me feel like I got some bearings, I feel like it was making me feel really insecure. And the more I started to realize with this content, I just wasn't strong enough. I wasn't good enough, wasn't faithful enough. And when I finally took a step back and I said, you know what, I'm not going to read any of these blogs that are telling me how I need to function as a Christian. I'm just going to take in God's word. I'm going to rest in God's strength. I felt like my whole aim was different. My whole outlook was different. I began to feel like, yes, I'm not strong enough. Yes, I'm not faithful enough. Yes, I'm not good enough. But Jesus is. And when I begin to rest in him and his strength, that's what holds me together. That's what gives me what I need to function in this life. I'm a better husband because Jesus gives me the strength to be a better husband. I'm a better father because Jesus gives me the strength to be a better father. I'm a better pastor because Jesus gives me the strength to be a better pastor. So really it was just a shift of recognizing, remembering, and trusting in the strength of God to have a healthier Christian experience. So, yeah. So obviously a lot of personal things came out in that, but
Yeah, and that's just a big theme in this record. I think when you endeavor to talk about the bigness of God, you're confronted with the smallness of yourself and the insufficiency of yourself, and just like feeling like, man, how do I find the right words to say that are fitting for what I'm trying to communicate? How do I compose music that is fitting for what we're trying to communicate? And constantly finding ourselves back at that, which is a big part of also with the delay of the record, is just like looking at deadlines and being like, I can't imagine getting this record done in time and it being something that I'm going to be excited about being released, you know? And so being like, let's just take a step back again. And I felt a lot of physical weakness in the process of doing the record, but there is that awareness that, okay, well then cool, that helps me to realize what should be completely evident anyway, and that is that I am entirely dependent upon God. He's the one who gives me life. He's the one who sustains me. He's the one who holds me upright. In fact, the whole basis of my relationship with God is dependent upon what Jesus has done in my place and not what I can do myself. And so that coming to trust in the power of God is also the relinquishing of saying, I can do it on my own, or I have the strength in and of myself. And it's actually the recognition, no, I don't have the strength, therefore I will rely upon God. I know there were some questions that came in regarding the artwork. This was created by Anthony Benedetto, who does almost everything that comes out with Humble Beast. But he's done all the covers for all the beautiful Eulogy records, and yeah, he put this together. He had a sketch that was very similar from Clearback 4 or 5 years ago, but the embellishments and things were developed over time. Looks really good on vinyl, looks really good on CD, looks really good on t-shirts. So however you want it, you can get it. Now, hey, here's a question, Cortland.
Yes.
So we're about to start this Worthy tour. We start in the West Coast. We're going to hit Texas. January, we're going to hit the Midwest and the East Coast. We're still working out details for that. What's going to be different about this live show experience, and why should people come?
Well, one, it's a new album, so new songs is a big part of that. And with new songs comes a new live performance in terms of its look and everything. So, I mean, for the first time, we're coming out the gate trying to be some actual musicians, you know? But yeah, I'll be playing the piano live. Thomas will be playing drums and triggering some stuff, and Brian will be rapping as always. So,
And preaching.
So yeah, I'm actually really excited. We've been, it's funny. It's like we've had 6 weeks since the record's been done, but we've just started putting together the set. But we're grinding to get it as solid as possible. So we're excited. I mean, it's going to be a new experience for us, and I think for y'all as well. So you should definitely come out, and hopefully you'll enjoy it and worship with us.
If you noticed in 2017, we haven't done a lot of shows. In fact, I think this year we counted, we've maybe done 7 shows. And, you know, as our responsibilities increase in other areas of life, I think us putting together tours like this is not going to be super common. And so I would encourage you, if this is something you want to check out and see live, come see us, because I don't know when we're going to schedule the next one. So yeah, come be a part of it. We're going to get into now devotion and slaying. And if I kind of, no, see, it's right when I pick up the arm. Do you need the flashlight again? It didn't help at all. The shadow is still right there.
That's
The end. They wanted to hear Chad again. That was far back, though. It wasn't even the last loop.
That's why white vinyl is clear.
What is authentic faith? The cultivation of an optimistic outlook on life with a kind of spirituality attached to it, a holy hoping for the best. Is this how you think of faith? Authentic faith is the confident assurance in events not yet seen. Faith is not a call to believe in things when common sense tells you not to. Faith is not a mindless stab in the dark. It is not a crossing of the fingers and hoping for the best. It is not a leap into apparent nothingness. It's a word that speaks of reasoned, careful, deliberate, intentional thought. Thought upon what? God and His promises. If you are absolutely gripped by the coming realities that have been promised to you by God, then how you live your life in the present will be radically different than if you did not possess such certainty. This is what faith is, my friends. Positive certainty expressed in action. Authentic faith is not merely believing in God. It is believing God. Taking God at His word, living in obedience to His revelation, whatever the cost, because you know down deep in your bones that God will always do what He says, that His speaking is His doing. It is an abiding assurance in God and His promises that animates you to persevere in your obedience to Him. Do you wish to be a more consistently obedient, steadily persevering Christian? A stronger Christian? A more courageous and outspoken Christian? Then you need to strengthen your faith. Your faith instinctively strengthens in direct proportion to the expansion of the object of your faith. You expand your understanding of the object of your faith, and faith itself will obediently follow. The object of your faith, if indeed you are a Christian, is Jesus Christ and all of His promises. Is your faith weak? It is owing to the fact that you don't know the object of your faith well enough. But when Jesus Christ becomes progressively bigger, or better yet, your understanding of who He is progressively conforms to reality, your faith will become increasingly stronger. But how does that happen? By immersing yourself in the faith-arousing Word of God. Read of Jesus Christ. The same powerful Word that long ago brought the universe to life is the same Word that can bring you to life and furnish you with a faith that is truly and authentically Christian.
justice, you probably don't know peace. At least the kind of peace that Jesus brings us on account of belief. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a direct correlation between your profession of faith and your expressions of grace to the hopeless. Yeah, it's true that all men are broken, but to only help the healthy would make us miss the open wounds that matter the most in those moments. The deconstruction of dignity buried deep in the heart of assumptions, where selective justice is just another name for social corruption. A system is flawed when just cause is just because, but even a man at odds with the laws made in the image of God. It's admitted that none of us are innocent, all of us complicit, but to solicit the silence of injustice doesn't just dismiss it. And just in case you forgot, Christ will come at just the right time. A divine king bringing perfect justice to judge all of mankind. The only difference between us, I'll stay seated at Jesus' feet and rest between the span of his hands where justice and mercy meet.
There's an iris in my iris, I was blinded, close my eyelids, see my Savior laying down his righteous life and saying, I forgive. Iris in my iris, I was blinded, close my eyelids, see my Savior laying down his righteous life and saying, I forgive. Iris in my iris, I was blinded, close my eyelids, see my Savior laying down his righteous life and saying, I forgive. Iris in my iris, iris in my iris, iris in my iris, deep down I know my eyes are sick.
The wrath of God is coming, can you hear the warning? Joy comes in the morning, but now is the time of mourning, when all I'm seeing lately is a nation going crazy, looking bad, need some hope like the words maybe. If or probably, but if I'm honest, in light of all these problems, if my hope is only probable, how long till it dissolves? I don't have the capacity to see these problems solved. I take comfort, knowing that my God is still involved, that's my certainty. When the road I'm on is serpentine and I'm threatened by the serpent sting, the evil one is prowling, looking to devour. But no one can usurp the king. Lord, have mercy while we're waiting for the final hour. This is my father's world, it's also a fallen one. The domino effect has infected the whole setup. I'm not afraid to talk about social injustices. Let's also talk about the throne where perfect justice is. It sounds insensitive, and some will hate the stench of it, but the church is not faithful if we fail to mention it. We worship a God who can speak to the world's pain, because salvation for us came through the Lamb who was slain.
There's an iris in my iris, I was blinded, close my eyelids, see my Savior laying down his righteous life and saying, I forgive. Iris in my iris, I was blinded, close my eyelids, see my Savior laying down his righteous life and saying, I forgive. Iris in my iris, I was blinded, close my eyelids, see my Savior laying down his righteous life and saying, I forgive. Iris in my iris, iris in my iris, iris in my iris, deep down I know my eyes are sick. Eyes are sick, eyes are sick, eyes are sick, eyes are sick.
I guess not. Too late.
Too late.
Well, man, I love listening to Devotion. Devotion was the one with Art Azurdia. People sometimes think, oh, is that John Piper? No,
Nope.
It's not John Piper. On all of our albums, we've included a sermon kind of chopped up from Art. First, Cortland, I want to talk to you about the music.
Yeah.
That was initially the music for the song Sovereign, which Thomas and I were like, it's not quite working for us with the raps. But Cortland, you always had an affinity for the music. We liked it as well. But one thing that's cool about that is that there's the live strings. It was also on Doxology. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that was the first time between Doxology and Devotion. It was the first time I've ever written like a string piece and had like a quartet or any live string players play what I wrote, which is like kind of a bucket list thing for me. I would still love to work with a full orchestra at some point, but quartet was like just perfect. So yeah, they just kind of took what I wrote and then played it, and they just did an incredible job. But yeah, and the music in general, like it's funny because it's like we initially were going to use it for Sovereign, but it's funny because I actually wrote that piano melody, I think, after a church service at the piano one night, and you can kind of hear it, but in the instrumental version, you could probably hear it more. But yeah, I just I wrote it there, so it's kind of special to me that Art is on that piece. And yeah, it just kind of, it really fit. I think, again, it has like a lot of movement, so there's a lot of tempo changes. And I think it just really fit with, and it's like every time I feel like we work on chopping up Art's sermons, for some reason, it's like as we're listening and we're like, this is the sermon, it's like almost like he's on time with the music, you know?
Perfect,
it just lands so good, even when we had all those tempo changes and he's like the pacing. And I mean, I feel like we barely had to nudge stuff around. It just really, really worked out well. So,
Well, the first album, so Satellite Kite, you had the kite string. It was like the perfect sermon that fit with the album. And then on Instruments of Mercy, we had this sermon that was on mercy, fit perfectly. This album, it was some work to find a sermon that was the right fit, because it needed to play. The obvious step would be, okay, just find a sermon that's about worthy, and then it would fit. And we kind of tried that, but it just didn't gel well. And so talk about just finding the right sermon for this record.
Yeah, well, this sermon is part of a sermon series that we listen to, and the sermon series escapes me right now, but
Hebrews.
it was in Hebrews. What was the name of it? It's not important. We'll find it and we'll make reference to it. But as we were looking for it, we were kind of coming down to our deadline. I just began listening through a couple sermons of Art's that have been really impactful on me as a whole, and things that really communicate faith really well. And so I just kind of found this sermon that was in my podcast, and it just kind of jumped out at us and was like, this is the one that we have to use. And so we kind of strung bits and pieces of it together, and then I passed it over to Cortland, like, try to fit this on the track. And when we just landed on there, it just felt like the two belonged together, and so it was perfect. And then the content, I mean, Art always, there's rarely ever a time that Art doesn't crush it in terms of content. And we constantly bring Art into our recording process and into our world of Beautiful Eulogy, because I think, humanly speaking, Art has probably been the most influential on Beautiful Eulogy. I mean, all of the songs that we've created as Beautiful Eulogy were created under his preaching and teaching, under his care for us. And so a lot of our content has been really helped by Art's love and care for us. And so it just seemed only fitting to include him in our works of art, to put Art in our works of art. So when we thought about doing this final, this piece on this record, we felt like, this is going to be a good look for us. And he crushed it. He did a really good job. And he doesn't even know he's writing these sermons for it.
I don't even know if he's heard it.
I don't know if he's heard this one yet.
Hopefully he doesn't get mad.
Take it off.
What I'm really excited about, when I was listening to it, I just thought about how impactful I think that piece has the potential to be for people. I know a lot of times there are just misunderstandings even on what faith is, and Art's ministry has really helped to define that in my own life. And so I could just imagine people, at least when I was listening to it, I was like, I just wonder how the Lord's going to use this.
Yeah, for sure.
People who have heard of Jesus but had never really thought what it looked like for them to trust in him, and maybe just God using this piece to connect the dots in their mind in such a way of actually bringing about real faith in their lives. And so, I'm really excited to see how the Lord uses that piece. After that, we have Slain, which is pretty unconventional on this album in terms of, it was just interesting trying to find where does this song fit in. It's a little more aggressive, a little more dark. You have these like chaotic drums when it starts. I always loved the initial demo of the beat, and we always had a hard time, how do we turn this into a song? And one night Cortland was like, man, maybe I'll switch the tempo, drop it down lower. He took one of my old lyrics from Organized Religion, pitched it down, and the chorus was the hardest part. The outro of the song was initially the chorus music, and Thomas and I just could never figure out, we can't sing on this, that's not gonna work. Do we do like a chorus like Wonderful, like a chant? That didn't work. And then when you came up with that,
Sold.
Yeah, that's what it needs to be. That's what it needs to be. So it's like the most kind of bass-heavy song on the record, and kind of has this playful side. But it's also interesting because it's a lot different than the rest of the record in terms of content. And a lot of people will notice, Humble Beast, we put out a variety of different types of content. Beautiful Eulogy, we do specifically make records that are very theological, but also that are in the realm of songs that are created to prompt and compel the listeners towards the worship of God. And sometimes people will be like, okay, well, you're doing the propaganda record and he's dealing with a lot of social issues, or you're doing the Show Baraka record. And the thing is, everything that we put out at Humble Beast, we put it out because we fully support these artistic endeavors, and we are passionate about those things as well. And I think we wanted to add something to that conversation, but in a way that fit within this album. And so in Slain, I think when we think about, tragic events happening in our world and how to make sense of them, and even like feelings of hopelessness, and we think, man, as a Christian, I don't really exist in a space of hopelessness, because the most tragic thing that has ever taken place is that God sent his son to this earth and mankind rejected him and nailed him to a cross. And yet through that, God actually accomplished salvation for sinners. And seeing that God revealed his power to save through this tragic event, and the fact that we actually have identification with Christ, who came as a lamb who was slain, literally died on the cross for the salvation of the lost, that begins to become this paradigm shift for us, where we can say, okay, because Jesus is the Savior of the world, but also because he will come back as the righteous judge, we are never, despite the tragedies that are occurring around us, in a state of hopelessness if our hope is attached to Christ. He is actually victorious even in tragedy. And that was part of the aim of creating a song that said, yes, we want to be advocates for justice and to see ultimate justice coming through Jesus Christ. That, you know what, sometimes it seems almost insensitive to begin talking about this kind of end times justice and ultimate justice coming through Christ, but I don't find it insensitive at all. In fact, I am declaring to people in their most broken moments where true and ultimate hope can be found through Christ, who was crucified, that, you know what, yes, I am going to be through this life, and in various ways people are going to be victims of the sins of others, but we are sinners ourselves. And Christ, who had no sin, the one who is truly innocent, subjected himself to the greatest injustice, that we might now be justified by faith in him. And so that process of writing it, at least I felt sensitive to my choice of words, because I wanted to declare Christ while in this context of social justice issues. That, not to say that social justice issues don't matter, but that Christ always matters regardless of what we're dealing with. Now let's get to the end of the record, Emmanuel and Worthy. I'll turn that on for you. Thank you, bro.
Lift up your eyes and see the riches of the all-sufficient King seated on his throne in glory. See his scepter that stretches the expanse of unmeasured space. Hear him who holds all things together declare, all things are mine without exception. See the curiosity of the cosmos as Christ condescends to his most cherished creatures. See the astonishment of angels as the Almighty advances towards earth. See the humility of the pre-existent King born of a virgin birth. The infinite becomes infant. The Maker becomes man. The divine becomes despised. And the Christ is crucified. The author of all creation cursed upon the tree that he himself spoke into being. And the Lord of life was laid in the tomb. But the grave could not contain him, and so the Son of Man was raised to life. But why? To draw near, to pierce our greatest fear, to shed satisfying blood on our behalf, to give back the life we were meant to have, to enjoy, to hear, to adore, and to taste, and to look with peace upon our Savior's face, and to embrace him with an undying faith, to interpose all his worthiness into us, and serve the most unworthy and undeserving. He is our God, and we are mere men made by him. We are not like him, but he loves us and moves among us, the great uncreated and the created, no longer separated. He is Emmanuel, God with us.
What a joy it is to stand in Christ, forgiven, righteousness and eternal life when salvation is given. All my sins paid for and I could never repay you, but now my greatest delight is to trust you and obey you. More than a genre of music, worship is a heart change. I gladly bow my knee to the God who never changes. Every day I'm changing, becoming more like Christ, adoring what is good, adorned with the fruits of new life. And my hope is not a fantasy, it's built upon a reality that you will keep your promises according to your sovereignty. I will see your face and be safe under your reign. When my faith turns to sight and only perfect love remains. Your people are my people, no matter where they come from. The church exists according to the works of God's Son. So in the new creation, when we're gathered in his name, it will be obvious that he's the one who's worthy of all fame. Because the worthiness of Jesus is the reason we belong. So worthy is the Lamb, will forever be our song.
Wisdom, power, and praise, glory, honor, and strength. Worthy to the Lamb who was slain, be wisdom, power, and praise. And to the King on the throne, be glory, honor, and strength.
There is a space between us, it's a right divide. Distance between the depths of your worthiness and mine. Mine is derivative, all my worth comes from thine. I am merely a man, all thy works divine. I abide only as a branch attached to the vine that grows the beautiful fruit that gets crushed into wine. I am the least deserving, made worthy to touch his feet. A servant that did nothing to earn a seat at the wedding feast. I'm a created being, you created everything. You make footstools of fools and galaxies your rings. You are Christ the consummate, my hope and every confidence. Worthy to receive praise from every mouth and every continent. Infinitely worthy of loyalty and my allegiance. Worthy enough to die to self, to offer my obedience. Worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Son of Man. Worthy is the one who takes the scrolls from his holy hand. Where angels and elders and living creatures all fall and worship the highest King, the most worthy of all.
Wisdom, power, and praise, glory, honor, and strength. Worthy to the Lamb who was slain, be wisdom, power, and praise. And to the King on the throne, be glory, honor, and strength. Wisdom, power, and praise, glory, honor, and strength. Worthy to the Lamb who was slain, be wisdom, power, and praise. And to the King on the throne, be glory, honor, and strength.
Like that, you know?
There it is. Ooh.
Well, see, that's why I didn't do it ever. Never doing that again. So those were the last two songs, Emmanuel and Worthy. as I mentioned earlier while we were playing Mosaic, originally I was going to do a poem on Emmanuel, and then we were going to both be on Mosaic. We ended up switching that towards the end. So this was the second to last song that was completed while I was at home mixing, which that's just a side note. This was cool. This was my first time mixing a Beautiful Eulogy album.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Because it sounds incredible.
It sounds exactly how we wanted it to sound.
Yeah.
So it's
Yep.
good.
It was fun. It was fun. But while I was mixing that, you guys were working on Emmanuel. We originally had different music for this and went a whole different way. Remember?
I don't even remember the original.
It was like that flute and piano.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I was going to do a poem over that.
With all
which-
those live instruments on there.
Yeah. But the thing was, I'm so happy the way things turned out. One, I started doing poems when we started doing Beautiful Eulogy. I've never considered myself to be a poet. There's poetic aspects to my rapping, but not a spoken word artist. And so I did those because it was a natural fit. Sometimes we were in events where we were asked to do spoken word poems, and I didn't want to just go up there and rap, things like that. But to me, the fact that Thomas did all the poems, I think of Thomas as truly a spoken word poet as well as a rapper. And so I ended up just rapping a little extra, and he ended up doing the poems. But they were working on Emmanuel, and I had no clue really what was happening because the music changed. Thomas was writing a new piece, and I was working on that. So talk about writing that. What was kind of your process for that?
Yeah, well, when we had the title already picked, and so I really just wanted to accentuate this idea of God being with us and really putting on display from the vantage point of creation, so angels and the cosmos all peering in on this event in space and time where the God of all creation who spoke things into existence would condescend to be among his people, and the implications of that. So the awe of the angels, the curiosity of the cosmos, like everything pointing in on this center event, the most amazing event in human history. Also that God could be with us and what that means for us through his life, through his death, through his resurrection and his ascension. So yeah, I mean, it was really, it was a little bit easier for me to write it because obviously Cortland made some music that already puts you into this space, this very cosmic space, this otherworldly space. And so it was just kind of natural to pen something. And so hopefully I did a good job.
Hopefully.
I love it because it's between you doing the first poem and then that coming towards the close of the record.
Yeah.
It's like this kind of bookend, and also just a little nerding out. The music too is kind of a bookend as well. So it's the exact same chord progression, exact same key as Wait is in that song. So it's kind of like, and then Wait goes into If in the same key, and then Emmanuel goes into Worthy in the same key. So it's kind of, you got these like kind of
Bookends.
4-track bookends. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, it's interesting because the original music we had, I really enjoyed it, but it was like more like easy listening, and this kind of took it to that place where the way it pairs with Wait and pairs with the Worthy, the title track, just has that bigness, that
Which it needed. I mean,
yeah. I really think it just brought a whole new perspective again to what I was imagining in a way that I think will be really beneficial. I know some people that we let hear the record in advance, they found that song to be just really worshipful for them. So I'm excited about that. Talk about Worthy, the title track.
Man, I can't remember. I think that was one of the Wait and Worthy, I think, were the first kind of demoed tracks I'd made when we were considering making the album.
Yeah, we had that beat for a while.
Yeah, and so to me, it was like those two just really kind of set the trajectory for what the album would end up being. And so Worthy, yeah, man, I mean, I just always loved that track, and I think it just had like, I don't know, it just felt like Beautiful Eulogy, but it felt like a new take on Beautiful Eulogy. And also it just felt so right for just the concept. And so I don't know if we knew that that was going to be the title track for the record.
I think
Not until
early
later.
on when you made it, I just always had that in mind.
Yeah.
I was like, this feels like it should be the title track for
Right.
Worthy.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it has like a lot of openness to it, obviously, but I think the driving beat, and then it just pairs well with what you guys are talking about. And then the chorus was another chorus where it just took multiple times to get something. I think we all just kind of settled in with like, man, we should really think about what we've done in the past. And I think we just kept referencing Covet, and the chant at the end of that song, and just this kind of like declarative statement, you know. And I think it
Which
just,
is also, that's also just a verse. It's basically
Right.
a psalm, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this ended up being a verse in Revelation.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
really cool.
Yep. So it just worked out perfectly.
It really sums up the record well.
Yeah.
Sums up the concept of it. Yeah. No, it was cool. It was cool watching like the various little pieces come together and start to make sense, where here's a track that track probably had been around for 2.5 years or more.
Yeah.
In the early stages, but just kind of stood the test of time, and always felt like this is the title track, and it also felt like the way to end the record.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that is it. That's the new album, Worthy.